If the Jews of the first century didn't already believe that God existed in a triune form, isn't the Trinitarian view in conflict with Jewish thought? Dr. Brown, our Jewish member of the panel, let's start with you.
You know, look, the fundamental thing that everyone here at this table agrees with is that the Messiah had to die and rise from the dead, and that was the one thing that the disciples missed, that they didn't understand, and that there's almost no evidence or no evidence that Jews at that time were expecting a suffering Messiah, certainly not a crucified Messiah, and yet that's the one thing that happened. So there's no question that there were blind spots. And if we can agree that there was a blind spot on the most fundamental of all things, then the death of the Messiah, his disciples couldn't get it. After he rose from the dead, Luke 24, he had to open their minds to understand the Scriptures. When in Matthew 16, Jesus says that he's going to go to the cross, Peter rebukes him. You're never going to go to the cross. So the fact that they may not have fully understood the complexity of God's nature, that doesn't surprise me at all. But what's interesting, though, is that you do have some things developing. Philo is an older contemporary of Jesus, and he talks about the Logos a lot, the very word John uses for word in John 1:1. And he even speaks of the Logos as a creative agent, even as a second God. It's very, very interesting. And the Targums, which are the Jewish paraphrases, they go back in some form even before the time of Jesus and then develop. They begin to talk about the memra of the Lord, the word of the Lord. And this memra even takes on a distinct identity. So what they're struggling with is how to identify, how to fully understand this God who is immanent and yet transcendent, who is visible and yet invisible. So Yeshua brings it to light. John 1:18, he makes him known. As James quoted earlier, he exegetes the Father. So number one, there were fundamental things that the Jewish people of that day were getting wrong. Jesus explicitly addresses it on numerous occasions. And number two, there are streams of thought already developing in Jewish tradition and in Jewish philosophy that fit very well in with the concept of God's triunity.
How do you respond to that? Blind spots, Jewish blind spots.
Well, I agree that there were blind spots. I mean, even today, we have many, many blind spots. We see through a glass darkly. However, I believe that it can be firmly established that Jews of the first century did not believe in anything but the single God, Hashem. I mean, that was it. They were not looking for it. They did not believe that there was a second God coming. When they
We're
saw
not talking about a
Yeshua,
second God, though. We don't believe in a second God.
We don't believe in a
we believe in the
All
Lord.
right.
But quote me a text, Joe, just so I can understand. Quote me a Jewish text from the first century that is accepted by Jews as authoritative today, a Jewish text from the first century that talks about this issue.
Well, let me give you the Birkat Hamanim.
Which dates from when, roughly?
90 Common Era.
Oh, okay, so this is 2 generations after Jesus.
That's right.
At the earliest.
That's right. But we're talking about the believers in Yeshua, and what did they believe? Now, I submit that they did not believe that Yeshua was deity. They believed he was the Messiah.
My question, though, you said that Jews at that time were absolutely not believing in, expecting anything other than the Unitarian view of God, the way you're presenting it
right.
tonight. Okay. Please just give me a first century text from a contemporary Jewish source that verifies that. But please quote them to me, because they don't exist. All the texts come from centuries later. So you are projecting later Jewish belief back into that time, whereas I have the witness of the New Testament, much of which is written by Jews, telling us explicitly what they believed. And we also have in John 5 that the Jews there getting very upset with Jesus, and in John 8 getting very upset, and in John 10 getting very upset with him because of his explicit identification of himself with God. So he's making it clear. That's a blind spot they may have had. He's making it clear, but you don't even have text to support the position you're presenting.
Well, for one thing, we have Josephus, who goes into Jewish beliefs about God.
He's a generation after Jesus as well. Just give me one from that same time. That's all I'm asking. Only to say the statement you're making doesn't have text behind it. That's all. That's the only point I'm making.
Okay, in 30 Common Era, you didn't have even the New Testament. At the time that Yeshua was slain, Yeshua was resurrected, you didn't even have the New Testament. I mean,
but we have the words of those witnesses, though, who were there. Whereas any text accepted by Jews today as having authority comes from well after the time of Jesus.
We'll stay on this for one more minute. This is
let me go back to the Birkat Hamanim. Now, the Birkat Hamanim is where in the daily prayers, in the Shemona Esrei, the 18 petitions, there was a benediction that was put against, it was applied to the believers.
In all probability, there's debate about that. Or
There is debate about that.
Say specifically the Jewish believers, who are the minim, the heretics, or the. But there's debate about that.
Now, they're not. We know that they're not expelled from the Jewish community until after the Bar Kokhba revolt, after 132 Common Era.
I want to hear your point about this, because.
Okay, in that, all that time, the Jewish believers are active in the Jewish community. They're not expelled. When the Birkat Hamanim comes forth, if it is applied to the believers, it is applied not because they believe in an idolatrous way, that they believe that Yeshua is a deity. They would be expelled immediately. If that was believed.
The first thing is they're already getting killed in the New Testament times. So how much do we have to go beyond that? They're already being killed. John 16, Jesus tells them they're going to be put out of the synagogue, okay? Just confessing him as Messiah was enough to get them put out of the synagogue. So you're saying they weren't getting put out of the synagogue, even though the New Testament tells us they already were.
Wait.
And
The whole
you're also
reason
making
that
an
the
assumption.
Birkat Hamanim comes about in 90 Common Era is because there are so many Jews that believe that Yeshua is the Messiah in the synagogue. My point is, if they believed that he was deity, they would have been put out immediately.
No,
yes,
that's by your interpretation of it, sir. In other words, if you were the rabbi and you were interpreting it your way, you'd put them out.
No,
maybe their views were more in harmony with the general understanding.
Michael, if you believe they would
accept.
not be put out of the Jewish community for believing that Yeshua was deity, I don't understand you at all.
First thing, they were already being killed. Second thing, the New Testament explicitly says that there was reaction to Jesus. When he identified himself as deity, they were ready to kill him. And on top of that,
where do you have that they were being killed by Jews?
Oh, you know, I think of Saul. I think his name was Saul of Tarsus.
Yes, but,
and I think that guy's name was Stephen. Stephen comes to mind. I mean, forgive me for being facetious. But it was already happening. There was already, and then Saul has this encounter, and what does he say? What do you want me to do, Lord?
Okay,
that wasn't